Hi everyone, it's Maura Gamble from the Permaculture Education Institute, and I'd like to welcome you to Masterclass number 23. This is the series of permaculture masterclasses that I offer every month. So I'm glad you found your way here. Welcome to those who are part of the Permaculture Educators program, and welcome if this is your first time. So no surprises on the topic tonight. The focus is obviously on what can we do in these times of COVID-19. We're all in this together. We're in a global crisis, but what can we do in our homes and our communities? What can we do to build our personal and community resilience? And that's about food, about social connectedness, and also about ways that we could possibly supplement our income during this time, because as we all know, there's a massive global downturn economically as well. So this is a huge topic, so forgive me ahead of time if I seem to be skipping across a whole lot of different things. What I wanted to do is to point to a lot of key points, and we can dive into those at another time. Or there's also other materials that I've developed that can help you do that, or maybe that's something you can do together in your community. Before we continue though, I just did want to alert you to the fact that this system, there is a chat. So I welcome you right now, if you're not already, to dive in there and to say, where you're from, how you're going, what's up with you in your area, and your name. And that would be great. And also to be using that all the time as the session's going on, so that if you've got some resources to share, or if you've got a really great example or another idea, let's just keep feeding that in. So I am recording this, and that means that any of the comments that you put in the chat can also be included in the replay that gets sent out. So I encourage you to get a hold of that replay too, and I will email it to you, and feel free to send it further as well. So yeah, let's get going. But before I do, I'd just like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which I'm meeting with you today, the Gubbi Gubbi people, and to acknowledge their elders past, present and emerging. I'd also like to acknowledge that this always was and always will be Aboriginal land. So this masterclass series, as always, is presented by the Permaculture Education Institute. And we run a whole lot of different programs, from an online permaculture educators program, which is a permaculture design certificate, permaculture teaching certificate, together with business modules. I also have a blog that has over 400 articles, a YouTube with over 100 films, and also a practical online permaculture gardening course. Also run a permaculture charity supporting mostly women and youth in the global south. So together, this is sort of like the overall Permaculture Education Institute organisation, and this masterclass series that's been going for a couple of years now, free permaculture education based on topics that you choose. And so if you've got any ideas that you'd like me to include in future classes, then please put a note in the link as well. So the topic, the permaculture response to COVID-19, and really looking at how we can, as I said before, create personal and community resilience with kindness and with care in this time of crisis. And so what it makes me think is that very much the ethics of permaculture, earth care, people care, fair share, hold so true at this point in time. And what I'd also like to acknowledge too is that even though we're in crisis now with COVID-19, we cannot forget that we are also still in a climate and ecological emergency. So the earth care ethic at the fore, so all the things that we do in response to address this, we still need to hold the earth care principle at the core, as well as the people care and fair share, which we're seeing so much happening now and as so needed now. So we are experiencing rapid change, and the landscape is constantly changing. I know I've been trying to find lots of different programs to run recently, particularly in response to drought, in response to floods, in response to the bushfires, and now COVID-19. The landscape is shifting so much that really what we need to be looking at is actually ways to build resilience. And then it affects all of that. And we're all in this together. Now we see that. I think up until now it's still been, is it or isn't it? Whereas actually now we're all in this together. And there is no enemy. It's not about setting a war against something. We actually need to just face this together in a common sense way and please stay safe. And crisis is such a transformative thing. Everything is shifting at the moment, and shifting in a way that's presenting it to be, this is one of, the great challenges of our time. But what it does do is it gives us a chance to pause and reflect, and to articulate possibly what it is that we do want. We're so busy normally doing what it is that we do in our daily lives to get by, and we're having a forced pause. And so I hope that in this time that you are able to find the space to stay calm, to think about what it is that we want our world to be as we move out of this crisis. How can we use this as an opportunity to shift and change? And I said that and I winced at the same time, because I also recognize that we are still in the crisis, and we're still in triage stage. Actually, we've been in triage stage for months now with the bushfires and the floods and the droughts. Our role has shifted from being change makers to responders. Change is here. So those of us who've been pushing for decades to bring change, to catalyze change, actually now just need to respond to the massive change that's here and to work from that place. So we need to respond positively and practically. And so this is where I want to go to in the session. And we need to find ways to make sense together. We are all feeling the uncertainty and the fear and the anxiety and feeling vulnerable. But let's do that together and make sense of what it is that we want to be moving towards. I know many of you are personally touched by the COVID-19 crisis, some people more than others. I was feeling relatively safe until the other day. My dad ended up in hospital. It was my worst fear. He's got an underlying chest issue from pneumonia a few years ago. He's over 8, he's 80 something now. And when he went into hospital, my heart sank. I was thinking, this is not good. But thankfully, just the next day he was out. But all of us have something that's connecting us with this. People are dying. This is serious. We need to take it seriously. And one of the ways to help make sense together is through warm data labs. This is something that Nora Bateson has developed. And so I was on a call with her the other night because I'm one of the warm data lab hosts. And these are things we normally do together as a group, but we can't now. So we're coming up with ways to do it online. So I'll let you know about that soon. And one of the things you said that rang true with me is that every response has to hold within it a multitude of possible futures. So if we're in this space of responding, it's not just a one direction, that everything we do has to be able to be open so that it can ripple out and be interconnected with everything else and contextualized. There's not one particular recipe that you must do that's going to address this, basically, that we respond, and that each response in each local community that ripples out will be uniquely different and unique to that community and to the needs. So it really is about connecting and connecting and connecting and having the conversations. So make sure you do reach out and try and find ways to open space with people to have those conversations. But how can we respond with permaculture? Now, well, one of the obvious things that we can and we are doing is grow food. So it's just taken off. It's exploded. I don't know what it's like in your part of the world, but I've heard stories about every single nursery and anywhere that sells seedlings or seeds has just run out. People are diving in to get these planting materials, seedlings, seeds, fruit trees to get in the ground now. So I think people are realizing it. There was the toilet paper flush, and then there was the chemist rush, and now there's the seedling rush. But if you've missed out, there are other ways of actually accessing the materials that you need to grow food, and there are other things that you can eat as well. So I'm actually wanting to explore some of that. And also I wanted to mention another thing that Nora said, and this is a quote from her book. It's not just that and nothing else. So sometimes people, if you say, let's start to grow food. Yes, but that's not enough, or, well, yeah, growing food, that's okay, but we need to be doing this. Growing food is not just that. It's not just putting seeds in the ground and nothing else. It is actually the catalyst or the beginning of a whole new way of thinking and being in the world, with yourself, with the soil, with nature, with community, with the economic system. So growing food is the change. Growing food is the response. And it's not just that and nothing else. It is everything in the growing of the food. But one of the key things we need to really think about first and foremost when we're thinking about our food system is simplifying our needs. So how can we bring our food needs back to the most simple, readily available, local foods that we can access? Because if we're going to stay healthy, we need to be accessing as much fresh, nutrient-dense food as possible. So some top tips about getting your garden thriving and abundant. One, fill it with abundance. Fill it with a diversity of different plants. Really help to get it thriving and put as much in as you can in all different places. If you're only on a balcony, then you can fill your balcony. If you have an allotment, fill your allotment with food. If you have a front yard, a backyard, windowsills, make all of the different spaces you can filled with food at this time, because we want fresh, healthy food. And we can do this affordably, we can do it quickly, and as much diversity as possible, and keep it natural and organic. So the first point that I wanted to touch on was abundance. Has this ever happened to you? I went away over Christmas time and I came back and the pumpkin vines were taking over my house like little triffids. And but this is not a problem. When I walked home, I just saw, when I left, it was in drought. When I came back, the rains had come and these vines had taken over. Self-seeded pumpkin vines had taken over down the side of my embankment and down into my veranda. But here is a fantastic source of food. Every single one of those leaves is a spinach, basically. I use the shoots, the flowers, the leaves. So the young shoots, I go around and I pick them off and I chop them up and add them into frittatas or omelettes. The big leaves I would steam up. Then the prickles go away and I use them to wrap food and dip. So, you could have some rice and veggies in that. Or also just toss it in like you would any other spinach. If you're making a pie or a soup or a stew or anything, the pumpkin leaves are fantastic. So all of a sudden, snap, there is an enormous amount of food that normally we don't actually think about. So I think one of the key things about creating abundance is shifting our thinking about what we perceive to be food and what we perceive to be edible, and maybe get over ourselves a little bit about what are the edible bits and what aren't the edible bits. So I eat this all the time anyway. This is one of my main sources of greens. Now also you can see, as I was cleaning up this and pulling it back and chopping it up and adding it into food, I would come across little pumpkins. And unfortunately I couldn't keep them there because I still needed to get into my doors. But did you know that you can also eat the little pumpkins? So just slice them up like you would a zucchini. So mostly I'd like to keep the pumpkins to get to mature size, which then you can, of course, eat all of the skin, all of the seeds. It's all edible. You can just chop up the whole lot and make a big soup. Adding the seeds in too is really great because it adds extra protein, which is something we need to be thinking about producing more of. But if you do have these little pumpkins, and particularly, if they're in an area that you need to move the vines from, harvest them and use them and cook them up as well as the flowers. So the first thing, though, that we really need to do is to think about, what are the quickest things that we can do to get the most abundant food that we can? So firstly, the immediate things you can find to eat would be anything that's that you can wild harvest around. So what is around you that you can eat? What are things that also you can get sprouts happening in a couple of days. You can get microgreens happening in about a week. Salads and leafy greens, 2 or 3 weeks. So they're starting from the start, what can you eat today that is in and around you? So some of the things that you might think about wild harvesting, there's some great books about wild harvesting. I've got one here, that Wild Crafting. It's just come out recently. You might not be able to see that there. This is one from just this region called Wildcraft by Heidi Marika. Look, there's so many available in all different places now. But what are the things that often we either call weeds or that we just bypass and don't even really think that are food? So chickweeds, dandelion, plantain, there's so many wild fruits, wild berries, wild nuts, wild garlic, fruit trees up and down the streets. Where I used to live in the city, I lived in a street that had macadamias. There was another street that I used to ride my bike along, which was full of tamarinds, and there was another street that was full of lily-pillies, riberries. So as you're walking about, where are the food trees? Are there acorns and pepper trees, and where are they? There are some maps in some cities, but maybe it's time to actually start making little maps of where these sorts of foods are and share them. But be careful. The warning is always make sure you know that where you're harvesting things hasn't been sprayed or are not from highly contaminated areas. But you can wild harvest in your backyard. I'm always finding weeds that are fabulously edible. There's also wild harvesting in mushrooms, but again, make sure you know what you're doing. If you're down at the seaside, maybe there's some seaweed that you can harvest. And there's a great section and great resources from Milkwood Permaculture about which seaweeds to harvest. Wild sorrel, miner's lettuce, lamb's quarters, even cobbler's pegs, farmer's friends. So many different edible foods that we can access now. And part of that too would be accessing bush tucker foods here in Australia. So where I live, one of the main Indigenous foods that was the source of many cultural festivals and still going now is the bunya. And so this comes from an Araucaria type of ancient pine that has pine cones that are about 10 kilograms, and so never camp under a bunya. So when they drop and you split them open, inside you'll find these, they're about this size here, like pine kernels, pine nuts, but they are so beautiful, a bit like chestnuts, I suppose. They're kind of nutty and soft, and you can make all sorts of things out of them. So this is an enormous amount of food there. And so if you go walk about in some of the forests around here, this is the one that you'd be looking out for. What are the plants when you go walking in your forest or your park or your nature area that are the type of foods that you can wild forage? Also, there's little berries. So cedar bay cherry is one that's just in my garden at the moment. And so these little berries in particular are very good for lots of vitamins, a lot of vitamin C. Some of these are some of the highest vitamin C fruits that are possible. Actually, acerola cherry is right up there with kakadu plum, and that's a popular one in permaculture systems. It's 100 times more vitamin C in an acerola cherry than there is in an orange. And we need lots of vitamin C at the moment. So forage, wild harvesting, and then sprouting. So in a couple of days, you can get an enormous amount of sprouting food happening inside. So even if you don't have a garden, or you're still arranging a place to go and do some gardening, or still trying to organise the links with the local farmers groups or food box systems, you can be growing these inside. So, and you can get a lot of the seeds for these from your local stores. So, get a pack of chickpeas, soak them, and then you can be sprouting them. Fenugreek, lentils, mung beans, radish seeds, alfalfa, and even hemp. So all of these create, and if you do a mix of them, they create an enormously nutritious food that you can eat raw, but you can also put them into toss them into stir fries as well, or bake them into something, and that sort of activated food source is really beneficial. Now, microgreens, again, if you don't have space outside, or it's too cold still outside, on your windowsill in a nice sunny spot, you can be growing these microgreens. Now, the key thing with these too is that if you don't have a few hours of sunlight available, you may need to get like a grow light or something, which is possible to organise. And then you've got, and like some people actually have microgreen farms in their basement and make thousands of dollars every week, supplying them around the neighbourhood and to cafes and restaurants, which is probably not going to happen now, but you could supply them to other people. So there's a list here, a huge list. Now, instead of you copiously writing down notes, I think I mentioned before, these presentations are going to be available as a replay. So you may want to either take a photo of this or get the replay and not jot them down then. But this is just a starting point. Of course, there's many more. Maybe put in the chat, what are some of your favourite microgreens? A quick Google will find you abundant sources of either little how-to clips about how to get your microgreens started. It's a really simple process. The thing that I wanted to mention too is that actually the microgreens have 40% more nutrient density in it than they do once they get bigger. So this is like an ideal point in which to eat them if you want quick, healthy food. One of the ones that I really love to do that's super quick, and it's in the middle there at the top, chia. So if you've got some chia that you normally sprinkle on your breakfast cereal or something like that, just grab a little handful and sprinkle it onto some soil and cover it over and mist it every day for a couple of days, and you'll have them sprouting. And then you can just get some little scissors and snip them off, and it's a very, very easy thing to do. So try microgreens. Get out your sprouting kits again, and you don't need a kit. Simply a jar with a bit of cheesecloth or something over the top with a band or a piece of string, and that is all you need. We don't need special equipment. This is what I'm really trying to say, is all of this stuff, we don't need to go out and buy special stuff. We most likely can find it either in our cupboards, at the local supermarket, and in our cupboards we'll find the resources and the equipment we need. So you've got your sprouts and your microgreens. What are some of the things that are very quick to harvest? So if you were to plant them, they would come up within the next couple of weeks. So most of the Asian greens are super fast. Things like basil too, cilantro, coriander, cress is amazingly quick. Mustard greens self-seed in my garden beautifully, and once they get started, they're massive within a couple of weeks. So I highly recommend going for some of those sort of things. And open-hearted lettuces. So head for the open-hearted ones, so you can be coming and taking a leaf off one, a leaf off another, and a leaf off another. And so rather than planting and pulling, the idea is that we have some plants that just keep producing over a period of 3 months. And that way, one seed can produce so much more food than it does if you just do the plant and pull method. So what you need to do is be sort of feeding the soil, planting in some of these seeds, and then mulching and keeping on feeding them so that they can continue over time. I've had some lettuces and some, that just go on for months, and some mustard spinaches until they start to go to seed, and then you might sort of mulch them out and replace them. But this picture is of sweet potato greens, and so they are super abundant. So all you need to do is get a little section of a sweet potato. You can even grow that on your kitchen bench. You can hover it over some water and it will sprout out. You can snip off the shoots and you can eat those. But if you put it in soil, you'll get much more. So you can even have it as a hanging basket, a sweet potato, and then the tendrils come down and you can snip them off. Even better though, always better if you can, to put them in the ground, because in the ground, in living soil, they become part of that community, the plants and the soil life, and they stay so much more robust and resilient in drier times, in warmer, they're robust and resilient to different things that happen. While they're in pots, you have to take care of them much more. But if that's all you have, then absolutely go for it and just pack up as many pots as you can. with as many different foods. So a little snippet of sweet potato can get you started with that. And kangkong is also of the same family. It's a water spinach. And so you can just have that growing in a little tub of soil with a lot of water, and it will just produce. You won't be able to keep up with the amount of food that you get off these sorts of plants, which means that you have surplus to share. So you can make up little bouquets, food bouquets to hand to friends and neighbours, or to have in a little box at your front gate. Say, please take, or you can have an honesty box if you're wanting to charge for that. So I mentioned with the pumpkins right at the start that this is one of the key things that I think we need to do, is to eat more of each plant. Definitely, I think we could expand at least 10 times the amount of food that we grow simply by shifting the way that we think. So I've talked about the pumpkin, I've talked about the sweet potato. I mean, the beetroot leaves are more nutritious than the beetroots themselves. While the broccolis are forming, you can be eating the broccoli leaves. Not all of them. So that's why I'm saying pick one from, each of them. Radish leaves, pea shoots, and even the leaves of some trees are edible. So pomegranate leaves, young pomegranate leaves, edible. And there's a lot of leaves that you can use for flavourings or for teas. So mulberry leaf tea, olive leaf tea, lemon myrtle as a flavouring. So there's so many different tree crops, permanent ones, that may be already in your garden or around your neighbourhood that you maybe didn't recognise before as a food that you can start to use. Now the picture here is of that mustard spinach that I was talking about that's starting to go up. Now, we have a tendency to think, okay, once something's gone to seed, that's finished. What I want to encourage you to do is to think about eating plants through their whole life cycle, not just at the ideal time. So I mentioned right when mustard spinaches are young, you can start to take leaves off, and then they get these big leaves. So, keep taking one or two off the end, and always leave the central heart to grow so it can continue. Mustard spinaches and a lot of Asian greens have a tendency to sort of bolt quite quickly. But, so take this for example, the mustard spinach here, this stalk, as it's still going up like that, and while it's still supple, it's a fantastic vegetable. It's kind of like a spicy asparagus. So I would snip that off and then chop that up and use that with the leaves and the seeds and the flowers and everything that's on it. And that goes into my dish, stir fry, soup, whatever it is that I'm cooking. And then the plant will throw out another shoot, and so you can do it again. And it keeps doing that for a few times. And eventually it'll sneak one past you when you're not looking, and eventually get to be like it's hard and then it's no good for eating. But then you get the yellow flowers. So you can start to pluck some of the yellow flowers. Again, not all of them because you want it to continue to go to seed. So be harvesting those. They're really great fresh in salad. They're kind of like a peppery flavour, a rockety type flavour. They add really great extra taste into your salad. And then once the flowers are finished, you get little pods, and you can eat the little pods too. They're like delicious little sort of like popping, when you bite into them, they sort of pop like little peas, tiny little peas. So you can eat those, but they don't stay. You have to watch. You have to sort of be out in your garden and noticing. If they get too hard, then just leave them go until they're brown and dry, and then inside you'll see lots of little black seeds. So before they crack open, snip that off and just let it dry a little bit more somewhere safe where it's not going to explode out everywhere into your garden. And what I do is I generally put it into a sheet. Now I've got a YouTube clip about this you can watch, and I put it into a sheet and I wrap it up and do a little bit of a dance on it or squish it around, and all the seeds just fall out, and you get a great big handful of seeds. It's phenomenal how many seeds you get out of just one plant. So one plant makes thousands of new plants. But the thing with mustard is, so I haven't finished the story about the mustard yet. So with the mustard seed, it's mustard. So you can go inside and you can grind it up. You can sort of toast it and grind it as a flavour, add it into soups and put it onto sandwiches. You can, whatever it is that you're using that you want the mustard flavour, there it is in your garden. So right from the baby shoots to the big leaves, to the supple shoots, to the flowers, to the seeds, it's all edible, the whole lot of it. So again, if we're thinking about, I don't have much space in my garden, if we think about eating all parts and across time in all the different life cycles, but in a manageable way. So we're not destroying the plant, but we're working with it in each stage of its life. We can get huge amounts of food. And believe me, all of a sudden when you start looking at your garden in this way, you think, oh my gosh, why didn't I realize there was that much food already? Like the pumpkins, I've not planted pumpkins for about 15 years. I've also not planted tomatoes for that long either. They just self-seed where they want to in the garden. If they're in a spot that I'm happy with them, they can stay. And every day I go out and get another bowl of tomatoes, and they just keep coming relentlessly, which is fantastic. And when there's a big flush, then I can make all different sorts of, sauces and things like that. And I can see in the middle here too, there's I was just about to point to it, but that's no use for you. A chickweed. So if I spot that too, I would just pick that up and toss that into the salad as well. Really great. Or, if there's a lot of it, then it can go to the chickens. Now, radish is something that is a really fast-growing plant. And I often put radish, after I've planted everything out and some things are coming up and I'll see there's a gap, then I'll go and plug in radishes in between those because they kind of grow quickly and fill up spaces, and they'll grow. Also, another way I do it is if I'm getting started and there's some things that I know will take longer, I'll put radishes in between because they'll come and go before the other things have even got mature. But why I'm showing you this picture is these are the seed pods. So the immature seed pods of radishes are super delicious. So you can save some of the seeds, but you can also eat many of them. So again, the radish, the root, the leaves and the seeds and the flowers are all edible. And even eat the pods. So, I'm not just talking about the seeds inside, but the pods as well are really delicious. And again, more seeds. So coriander, do you have any coriander seeds in your pantry? The whole seeds that look like this that you grind up for spice. You may well be able to find some in your local shop. Go out and sprinkle some out and see what comes up. I did this and I got massive amounts of coriander coming up in my garden, and I love it. So, obviously, if you want to have coriander in your garden, some people don't like it. I absolutely love it. I put it in so many of my meals. So it keeps coming up, but once it goes past the nice little leafy stage and it starts to go into seed, I still eat all of those leaves on that and the flowers. And then once it gets to this point, when the seeds are green, you can eat them still. Again, nice little flavour to add to a salad. But once they go brown, then I just let them dry completely on the bush and then separate them and store them, or take them into the kitchen, or sprinkle them back out in the garden, or hand them around to friends and neighbours. The thing is with this is, let's not get stuck into the rush on the shops to buy all the seedlings and the seeds. Comes from a concept of there's limited resources. But nature is abundant. You can see here from all these examples that I'm showing that one seed of coriander will give an abundance of seed. One lettuce has 10,000 seeds. So work with nature's abundance. Work to then share that abundance around so that everyone that can have access to that. And there's many plants too that you might want to think about including the medicinal plants like the sacred basil, which are really fantastic to help, particularly with coughs and colds. And these sorts of plants, you can save the seeds from them, but the easiest way is actually to take cuttings. And I also have a masterclass and lots of little YouTube clips about propagation too. So check those out if you're not quite sure how to take cuttings from these plants. One of my favourite plants. What's your favourite plant? Why don't you put your favourite plant in the list down the side? One of mine is snake beans. It is so big, long beans that are abundant. So I get them when they're quite young, up until the stage you can see them in my hand there now. But then if they go too far past, I let them go fully dry on the vine, and then I collect those, and they're my dry beans. So there's lots of different legumes that you can be including in your garden, which is a really important thing I mentioned earlier about trying to get more protein. So seeds and legumes are fantastic for that. Now, I'm including this not necessarily because you'll be able to grow Gramachama where you are, but this concept of saving the seeds and planting them out and taking cuttings and sharing them around. So this is one of those cherry bushes that I have in my garden. It's called Gramachama, and it's from Brazil, and it produces a couple of flushes of cherries. I can't grow cherries here, so this is a tropical cherry. It's absolutely delicious. A couple of flushes every year. It's very robust and hardy. I can make it into a hedge if I wanted to, or along a fence. I've got it next to my chickens just to help keep it shady, and any surplus fruit I can toss in to feed them. And then I just go around and I forage in my own garden from all these little berries. And then, you can see the seeds here. There's 2 little seeds inside. And I was talking to an Indigenous elder friend of mine who was telling me about how, the Indigenous way of gardening is, you eat something, take the seed, and you just plug it into the ground where you want it. So there's this constant eating and gardening without it being, gardening and digging and making beds. The landscape is a garden. We all garden. Everything gardens all the time. Birds garden like that too. So let's think about how we can amplify what we have in our gardens without having to go and buy this plant or buy that herb or, buy those seeds. How can we be collecting and, putting them back into our garden itself? Now, we can also take cuttings off plants like this, a simple little snip off the end, stick it in the ground, and you're also going to get a plant. So from one plant, from this one plant I could probably get 1,000 new Gramachama plants very easily. Now, if we take that thinking and we look at our own gardens and see, okay, what are the things that we can pot up so we can give away as care packs to other people, or, if you're looking for some income to do as a way to sell too. And what are some of the plants that we can, if we're in the store, for example, what can we get? And we can make new plants from old. So I've already talked about sweet potato, but as you can see, a chunk of sweet potato, just put it in contact with the soil, and up it will come and create a new sweet potato plant. So the vines, and it will throw its roots down below, and then it will start to put new tubers. For 4 to 6 months, you'll get some new tubers. These potatoes must have got lost down the back of a cupboard somewhere, and look what they've done already, even without being in the soil. They're in a dark section, and they're already starting to produce potatoes. So potatoes, sweet potatoes, what else can you get from the store that you can just plant out? If you've got ideas, put them down in the list as well. Another one that you can do, spring onions or shallots. So just snip off the greens, keep the ends, plant them into the ground. You've got a whole new section. So we need not panic that the stores have run out of seeds and seedlings when we know that there's so many things that we can already. So maybe it may not be, maybe you can get an organic store, but if you can't, then at least you have some planting material that you can get something started, and then you, over time, as you can clean it through your garden and through your compost system and turn it into really great food again. There was something else I was going to mention. So there was the sweet potato, the shallots. You can do it with celery. You can replant the celery stub if it's got some kind of roots on it. Even the hydroponic herbs that you can get from the stores, you can stick them in the ground and get them to grow somewhat. Oh gosh, there's so many different ones that you can use, and it's kind of fun. The pumpkin, if you've got a pumpkin, take the seeds out from inside. A very ripe tomato, get a heritage tomato, and then you can plant that out. A capsicum, a fully ripe capsicum, you can get the seeds out of that, or a chili, you can get the seeds. I'm not sure. I don't go to a shop very much to buy food, so I'm just trying to walk my way down an aisle thinking what it is that you can find. So look at it differently. When you go into the shop next, look at the food on the store shelves differently. Both the packets of seeds that you see that you think are mostly as a grain or as a legume that you would just eat like that. But how can it be a source of things that you can use to grow And my big love are the abundant perennials. Now, once you've got yourself with your seeds and with your sprouts and your microgreens and your fast-growing greens, and actually the perennials are often very fast-growing, and they produce an abundance of food very quickly and for a long time, many years. So some of the ones that I grow regularly, and you can also find, I'm sorry that I keep saying this, but you can actually find lots of links to these in the YouTube. So if I don't have a picture of it here, there are resources there. And I've also just put together a clip, a series of clips calling the COVID-19 Resilience and Care Pack. And I'll put links to that as well in the replay notes that you'll get. But so some of the ones that I really absolutely love: Okinawan spinach, Suriname spinach, Brazilian spinach, longevity spinach. These are ones that I just always have in my garden. And even during the drought time, they were there. And when the rains came again, whoop, up they came. And so they create a living mulch, their habitat. There's little frogs and insects and lizards that live amongst them too. And so it's soil food, it's people food, it's habitat, and it's a sense of security. I see perennials as my security. I always feel a sense of, I feel at peace when I know that I can walk out and there's always something in the garden there. And chocos are like that too, like one choco. You can put that in the ground, it'll climb up a tree or a fence, and, some people curse them as well, but again, you can eat the leaves, you can eat the roots, you can eat the little shoots, the flowers, and then the chocos themselves are an abundant source of food. Ibica, bananas, of course, the banana fruit, but also banana flowers, and even green bananas. If you've got an abundance of bananas, you can dehydrate and turn into banana flour. Also, if you have an abundance of bananas, you can dry them and turn them into dried bananas as a little snack, which you can then actually use to help to sweeten. If you're doing something like muffins for the kids, for example, instead of having a whole lot of sugar, you can just soak some of the dried banana and blend it up and mix it in with the muffin, and there you've got your own natural sweetener that you've grown at home. So a dehydrator is something that's really good, but you can also do that in a low temperature in the oven. And there's some great practical tips on building at home dehydrators, solar dehydrators too, if you're a bit techie and want to get into doing that, because you have the time to do that now. Tamarillo is another plant. I'm just about to release a film about that. Tamarillo is a tree tomato, so a perennial tomato, which is fantastic, particularly in warmer climates. It creates an umbrella, which means you can have other plants underneath, so you've got this multi-layered garden. And this is also a really great strategy to make the most of the space that you have, and having multiple layers of food everywhere and creating a microclimate that's conducive for plants. And plants like to live in community. I find that plants thrive. They find their own little space, their niche, and they work their way in, and there is such an abundance of food there. And it's hard to actually measure how much, because you harvest a leaf, it just keeps growing up. it's just, I can't eat everything that is in my garden. So, I'm just about to build a little thing up the front to where I can, put surplus plants now and invite people to come in for cuttings and things like that. So, yacon, a Peruvian ground apple, taro, which this is taro. So again, another root crop. Now, part of the perennial root crops I really like, because I learned about these from the Pacific Islands, where if there's a tsunami or there's a cyclone or something, the tops might get all knocked off, but underneath is where the treasure is. And you can also eat the tops. I'm just going to go back to this picture. So that's the lovely heart-shaped leaf. You can eat the leaf and the stem, but warning about that is that, sorry, I just got a itchy nose. Don't eat them raw. They will be ultra painful in your throat and you'll feel sick. you have to cook them. It's safe if you cook them. People everywhere eat them, but eat them cooked. So cook them for at least 20 minutes, so the stem and the leaf. And then, as you can see, there's a huge amount of food. And the roots themselves, you can just... and I don't know if you can see on there, this one just straight in the middle, you can see this little nodes starting to come out. They're going to get new ones. So keep them. I always keep the mother in the ground, and I just take off the ones from the side, and then allow new ones to grow. And then they're just forever in the garden. So, this may not necessarily be something from your particular climate, but what are the perennial plants that you can grow in your garden? And organisations like Plants for Future, so if you look up pfaf.org, you'll find a huge amount of resources. And the permanent publications in England have put out huge amount of books on the topic of perennial plants. And if you look up any books about food forests, you will also get an abundance of that. So people like, Martin Crawford as well has beautiful books that talk all about that. So whatever climate you're in, you will find perennial foods. I'm just sharing you with some of the pictures out of my garden. And this one here, cassava. Now, cassava it feeds probably about 1/10 of the world's population with most of their source of carbohydrates. But yet it's not very well known here in Australia, even though it grows, as you can see beautifully. This is just outside here. So cassava is mostly eaten, the root is mostly eaten, but you can actually eat all of the green tops as well. Again, another warning on the tops of cassava that you need to cook it. You need to cook it for at least 15 minutes to get rid of the toxins, and then drain the water off, and then add it to whatever that you want to eat. And it's really, really nice. So I eat both the roots and the shoots. And again, this is a very easy plant to grow. You just take one of the stems, once all the leaves die back in the wintertime, and then stick that in the ground, and you get another plant next year. It's that easy. Another one that has the root crops that's always there, which is Canna edulis. Now, so this is the edible canna, and there are many different sorts of canna that you'll see all on roadsides, very hardy plant. But this one here, I rely on a lot. Not only for the food, which is, you can see the one in the front there that's just got the new shoot out. That would be what I'm looking for. Once they've got the big stems, they get a bit rough, but tough and sort of fibrous. But this one here, you can chop that off with a knife and take that inside. So again, you're leaving the mother in the plant and just taking off little side shoots. And that way you keep your clump nice and manageable. The edible canna is a little bit like the sort of the clumping bamboos as opposed to the running bamboos. So if you're worried about canna taking over, a small clump of this is so easy to manage and so useful, because also all the tops I chop off regularly for mulch, and I add them into the chicken pen. Just use them as a in-garden windbreak or in-garden sunshade. But these you can use. They grow very quickly too. So put them in a nice moist spot, and you'll get the biggest the corms that you can want, and then you can chop them up. You could use them as a potato. So you can make little chips in them. You can add them to soups. You can add them to curries and stir fries, and even grate them raw into a salad. And there's lots of different edible plants. So, hibiscus have edible leaves, and this cranberry hibiscus has beautiful edible leaves. So, a functional garden doesn't have to be just bland. It can have different colours and structures and flowers and interesting forms. So, add in your beauty, think about the beauty of your garden as well as its functionality. And the two can be, that can be one and the same. So, protein. I mentioned peas and beans before, but one of the key things that we really want to make sure is it's easy to grow lots of greens. That's great. The beans and peas take a little bit longer than the greens. Take you a couple of months to get those. But eggs. So, have you got chickens already? Can you add more chickens to your system so that you can meet more of your meat? Not meat. I wasn't talking about killing the chickens. I'm trying to say you can have more protein, which means that then you can also have surplus that you can share as well. Have you thought about setting up a little spirulina tank, something that you can, if you've got a fish tank and an aerator, you can get little kits that you can order online too to get this started and inoculate it, and you can grow and have your own spirulina, which is enormously beneficial in terms of the protein content, but also the nutrient density of it. And again, you can be growing out, I've just ordered some hemp seed, organic hemp seed, to grow for the food, for the protein that you can get from the hemp seed. And also the hemp plants improve the soil and produce a huge amount of organic matter that we can use as mulch. So I'm really excited about getting that going too. And I just, the garden is not just about food, it's also your source of medicine in so many different ways. Now, I just selected some out that I thought are interesting because they're antiviral and they also are lung support plants. And I wanted just to point to you to some of the key ones that you may well have not realised are useful for that. And they're just common plants. So basil, dandelion leaves, eucalyptus leaves, garlic, ginger, lemon, or any of those sort of lemon balm, lemon myrtle, lemongrass, licorice root, olive leaf. So do you have an olive plant growing in a pot or out in your garden somewhere? You can be taking just the fresh leaves and putting them in a pot, and they will really help with coughs and colds. And have you ever heard of olive leaf extract? Well, it's something you take when when you're feeling like you need an immune boost, but you can be having that on a daily basis by having the fresh leaves. Oregano, peppermint, rosemary, sacred basil, sale, thyme, turmeric, all of these things are quite common and easy to access. I did notice that I do have honey in there, and I do know that that's not a plant. But if you do have access to local honey, that raw local honey is fantastic too for that, for sore throats and for mixing in with your honey and ginger drinks and turmeric drinks. There's one of the films that I've incorporated into the Resilience Care Pack is about a tea that I make and all the different ones that I include. So it's just a few minutes, you might want to watch that. But the key thing to making all of this really work well, to have your thriving garden, your perennial garden, is having your thriving soil and living soil. So make sure that you're protecting and feeding the soil, and treasure every bit of biodegradable waste that you have collected and traded. Join up into your share waste system, or talk to your neighbours and see if you can get some compost from them, or get some food scraps from them. Set up more compost systems, more worm farms, maybe start a bokashi system if you're indoors. That'll help to diminish the smell and activate it ready for when you want to bury it into the soil. Trade your compost, trade the scraps, join up different sort of systems, really focus on getting the soil well. And again, there is another masterclass about the soil, how to build living soil, and I encourage you to watch that too, because while we race in and get the plants in, if we don't focus on getting the soil really thriving and keep up the nutrients in the soil and keep it living and protected, then our plants aren't going to thrive for very long. So we can also be growing our own mulch and fertilizer, and comfrey is the perfect example of a plant which grows in many parts of the world and is so useful for this. So I have lots of comfrey growing all around the garden, and I'm constantly chopping and dropping it in the garden. I'll add it into compost as a compost activator. I take leaves of it and I stick it underneath when I'm making a no-dig garden, and I collect leaves and I put it into making my own liquid fertilizer. So, one plant can do so many really beneficial things. The canna is also really great mulch. I even use when the pumpkins head off and I'm making, I can't eat all of that, that gets chopped up and added as mulch as well. So, what are the plants that you grow in your garden that are really excellent mulch plants? Because these are the plants that are going to be adding organic matter into the soil and protecting your soil. So, if you're not buying hay bales, or you don't want to buy plastic wrapped mulches, what are the things that you can use from your own garden or from your neighbourhood? fallen leaves. Again, just making sure that you're not picking them up from contaminated areas. But I'm sure there's lots of plant material. So walk around your neighbourhood with a set of permaculture glasses on and see what you can see. I'm sure that you will start to identify lots of resources that are available, that you may well be able to take cuttings or resources, in a very respectful way and not damaging anyone's property. But, maybe there's someone over the street that has a plant that looks like it needs a bit of a trim, and you can help them and use that in your own garden, or for theirs for that matter. And, there's things like daikon radish, which has this, the long white radish. So I plant those to get this enormous top, which makes fantastic living mulch. The bottoms are great for making ferments. I eat the leaves as well, and the flowers. You can see some of the flowers on the tips there. This one was one of the plants that Fukuoka recommended to include in his no-till method. So everything's coming from the garden, going back into the garden. Your permaculture garden is fantastic, positive, practical action. It's helping to build a regenerative local food system, whether it be in your garden, in your neighbourhood, taking this to the streets. It's helping also at the same time reduce your ecological footprint. It's helping to rewild your garden and also rewild yourself. It's a healing space, not only because it's got medicinal plants, but also because it's a healing thing to actually get your hands in the soil. There is so much evidence now. Doctors are even recommending for patients that they go and garden as a way to heal themselves. So it's healing for ourselves, it's healing for the soil, it's healing for our food system. And they also become learning spaces. So when we can invite people into our gardens again, they are places we can either run classes, or they are places we can take people for tours. Take people for some virtual tours of your garden as well. It's a really great thing. People will, what have you got that you can share with other people? All of us need to become ambassadors for this. All of us need to become educators in this. You may not know everything, but you know something, and all of us together hold pieces of the information. A lot of the great information that I've learned about permaculture over the years has not come from books. It's come from going and visiting people, seeing how other cultures have set up their gardens, trial and error. And so, if you've got something to share, don't feel like it's, I'm not an expert. We all hold a piece of the information, so please share it. And also, your garden is a fabulous source of seeds and plant material, and be really free in sharing that around too. So growing a garden is primary, but also so is growing community. And I think what we need to try and keep in mind too, that at this time, maybe we need to shift the language from being not so much social distancing, but physical distancing. So we can keep ourselves apart a bit more, but we don't necessarily need to close ourselves off from other people. So make sure that you're reaching out to people, reconnecting people that you haven't spoken for a while, checking in that they're okay, and supporting people as much as you can. Share your skills. It could be on a Zoom link, it could be on a blog post, it could be in a Facebook post, it could be over the phone. We can use WhatsApp. There's so many different digital forms that we can use to share this. Share your resources, like I said, have them out the front, and share the care. So make sure that you're part of the team of people in your local area who are looking out for other people and making sure that we're checking in. So while we can't be doing this right now, gathering together at community gardens, we still can be focusing on supporting local community food systems. If we have an allotment, if we're keeping our social distancing, that's what's recommended, we can still go down to the community garden. We can still tend our allotment. And actually, it's imperative that we do that now. And it may be a very comforting thing to be in the garden at our, physical distance from each other, gardening together, and maybe calling out or singing a song together or having some music playing. It, I think, is a really critical thing right now, that we continue this and to set up box systems as well. So maybe, if you're not already part of a food box system, try and join one, or maybe even start one. Community-supported agriculture systems like Food Connect in Brisbane are absolutely fantastic. What they do is they link together a whole series of farms in a region and then connect urban dwellers with those farmers as directly as possible. Check them out, Food Connect. They're an absolutely brilliant example of a social enterprise that is just lifting the community, lifting the regenerative economy, lifting regenerative agriculture. So you may not want to take it to that scale, but you could start up a simple food box. Many years ago, when I was living in the city, and we were also working at the city farm, so there's certain things that we could grow, but there's certain things that we didn't, and that we didn't have enough of while we were getting the community garden happening. So we linked with a farmer on the edge of town, and so so there was about 30 odd families who were part of this. So once every 30 weeks was our turn to go to the farmer to collect the food and bring it back in, and then we would divvy it out from whoever's house picked it up. So we can do that kind of thing. So really check out these community food systems. I made an introductory film about this, quite some time ago, maybe 15 years ago, called Think Global, Eat Local, A Diet for a Sustainable Society. And I included 6 different sorts of community food systems that, as I travelled around the world and looked at ways that communities were relocalising their food systems, that these 6 key forms kept coming up over and over. It didn't matter whether I was in Korea or Hong Kong or England or Cuba, that they were these key forms. And so check out that film too, and see if you can join a community-supported agriculture system. And what this means is that actually, if you support these box systems, it helps those local small-scale farmers to stay in business in this challenging time. And so what it means too is that they will come through it and they will continue to be there producing food, but in a way too that they get more income. So in a community food system, there's less middle people happening. So the farmer gets more and the consumer pays less, and it's a win-win-win because it's regenerative for the environment too. Where you can, try and do some bulk buying. Here at Crystal Waters, we've been setting up some mutual aid groups, and one of the ideas that's come out is to get the bulk buying happening again. It happened, a while ago. I was part of a bulk buying group, but then, I don't know, for some reason or other, things go in cycles. So we're arcing that back up again. So what do we need? What are the key things we need that we can buy in bulk and then we can share out? So things like bulk flour, bulk rice, bulk lentils, bulk honey or oils, or even bulk cleaners, bulk loo paper, and then we can do that as a zero waste packaging system too. And if you've got a surplus in your garden and that you really feel like you're not going to be able to get through it all, like, this pumpkin collection that I had, the food, you're up in the street, or you put a little box, maybe have, see if your neighbours want any, or maybe you could do a whole lot of processing and preserving if that's what you want, and maybe you can share that out too. And hello, Angie, if you're listening, thanks for linking me up with these wonderful people at the Community Seed Library, which is part of the Lampeter Transition Town Initiative, which is a brilliant example of what people can do. So there's a little clip. I've put the link down the bottom there. So there's a little clip I made of this little community seed library. So all volunteers collecting local seeds and having a spot at the local market where you can come in, you can deposit some seeds and you can take out some seeds. And so this is just building access to free seeds. Now there's another book that's just come out recently in Wales too, by Hugh Richards, and all about how you can grow food for free. So check that one out as well. So how can we, if this doesn't exist, how about trying to start something like this up? A little community seed bank, a community seed library, some kind of exchange of plants and growing material. I think it's absolutely fantastic, and really in times like this, these initiatives just become, yes, of course, this is common sense. They always were common sense. They always are common sense, but we see it more in times like this. So start one up now and keep it going, even when COVID-19, eases off and life gets back to normal a bit more. We need these sorts of systems more than ever. So the key thing really is thinking about how we can be relocalizing, meeting our needs as much as possible from in and around our local community, which helps us to really support the local economy, which is incredibly important now because we've become so dependent on the global economy, on global trade, that if something happens like this, if there's a shock in the system, we are vulnerable. So the relocalization gives us a chance to actually meet all of our basic needs, not all of them necessarily, but as many as we can from in and around us. And like I said before, it's this intense sense of security and safety knowing that that is there and that we can access that. And so it's really trying to rethink our lives from a village scale, whether we live in the city or a town or even out in the countryside, to really rethink our lives from that perspective. And I'm not saying shut down and be sort of insular, but to think how we can flourish and thrive, not just survive, by relocalizing and thinking from that scale. And re-inhabit the streets spaciously, of course, at this time. I've seen some great examples. I think they were from America where people would take their table out onto their nature strip and there'd be someone on the other side of the street bring their table out, and so happy hour in your street. So you're not in contact with each other, you're well away from each other, but you're eating your meal and you might be able to share a dance or a story and check in that people are okay and just feel that connectedness and bring the life to the streets. And we've seen that the brilliant examples too from Italy, where people are singing out from their apartments and doing music together. And so even though we're in this sort of, in many places, lockdown and self-isolation and told to stay inside, there are ways that we can spaciously and safely re-inhabit the streets if we're allowed to do that in our area. So please feel encouraged to stay connected. And another resource that I think is absolutely valuable in this time is Retro Suburbia, which is David Holmgren's book, which is all about how to transform suburbs into places of resilience. And I interviewed him at the last permaculture conference. Unfortunately, the one that's about to come has been cancelled. So we're trying to find different ways to connect online. But anyway, David's book came out not that long ago, and it's massive. It's a full guide to how we can actually live a more resilient, home-based life using permaculture. So perfect book to be picking up now. Now there are also a whole series of study materials that can go with that. So why not create a Retro Suburbia book club or study circle? And this way, if you have your book, or even if you have chapters of it, you can maybe download. There's a couple of chapters that are available for free, like the disaster resilience ones were put out for free, particularly at the times of the bushfires, but they're just as important now. So download those, share them around with some friends, and start your own study circle or book club. Or maybe there's some excellent documentaries that are available. I know that the Inhabit permaculture movie is now available to be watched free online. So why not get a watch party happening and then talk about that and see what you can get happening from that. Last year I was talking to friends of mine down in New South Wales, and I was saying how they have these fantastic social media local community groups for permaculture, because they're all scattered around the area. They're not in one little particular location. So they do a lot of sharing, a lot of network, a lot of troubleshooting, a lot of coaching through social media. So this is now a perfect time to really ripple this out. So every local community could have their own local online permaculture group. So let's get that happening. And you could use WhatsApp or Facebook. As much as I'm not trying to encourage you to all get on Facebook, but, what are the different ways that we can connect? If you have a group that you're part of, why not put that up up in the chat box if you have a book that you think would be great to share as a book club, or a study circle suggestion. If you know of some questions and discussion leading materials, then please put that in the link as well. Films that people should watch as a watch party, and also different ways that you can connect as these community social media. But on a more personal, like actually physically connecting, I also know there's some people now who are saying, look, I don't want to be isolated by myself in my house. I'm actually going to get a few people to come and live with me, or I'm going to go and live with them. And so together you're isolated. And so together you can do different things together and, not feel so socially isolated. You may be physically isolated from other people, but at least you have your core group that you can live with. And maybe that's something, particularly too, as there's more challenges with the economic crisis. It may be hard to continue to rent a place. We may need to think about sharing our house. Do you have a place in your house where you have a room available, a cabin available? Do you have a space where you can offer people to come and stay? A really interesting thing to think of, because we have so many of our houses one occupant only and have multiple rooms that are unoccupied. Maybe it's time now to start thinking about how we can invite people from our close network of people to see if we can think about sharing. So the last point that I wanted to talk about was really about how we can use permaculture to supplement our income in this time. And the thing is that if you've lost your job, or if your income has dropped, no doubt most other people's have too. So it's a challenging thing to try and think about starting up a whole new business, but maybe think about what are the things that people need? What are the things that people will need to access and that they could access from you? What are the things that you can make or mend or grow or do that can help people, that are really essential things that people need now, and see if you can activate those with this time that you have, if you're unemployed now, or if your employment has been cut so much. So not only is this helping you to meet your basic needs because you're producing things for yourself, but you could be producing things for other people. So some simple things. So you could be growing salads, setting up a microgreen farm, maybe growing spirulina that you could process and share, the seeds, the seedlings, the edible plants and perennials, ferments. You can dry some herb teas. Have you got worm farms that have got surplus worms? Start feeding them up and start selling the worms to people so that they can also have worm farms or worm towers. Become a permaculture farmer. Maybe, in your backyard you have enough space to create a little market garden, or perhaps if you between you and your neighbour there's enough space, if you put a gate through or knock down a fence to create enough space to have a market garden there. Or maybe it's time now where local authorities need to actually release space as part of parks to create market garden areas. Organically managed and done with diversity and care, and that could, once the crisis is over, continue. The reason I think about this is from the special period in Cuba when overnight, well, it wasn't overnight, but in a very short period of time, their economy crashed and they had no access to fuel. So in a country where the food was mostly imported or grown with tractors in large monoculture fields, they had to all of a sudden start growing food in and around the city. What did they do? They went to some of their parks, they took sections from the edge of fields and started farms there. And so the people who lived in the apartments here could take their food scraps down to the farm, it would get composted, put into the soil, and then there was a stall on the side there, and the food would go there, and people would be able to take their food directly up. It's relocalizing the food system. I've been approached by a development company who is about to develop up a new area, new suburb. And so we're now talking about, well, why not put a farm in the middle of this suburb rather than, being dependent and creating another dependent, sprawling suburb. So as well, not just little community garden spaces, but a significant farm. So all the wastewater, all the waste nutrients coming to this farm, it creates this metabolism. But that's kind of thinking a bit further along. But we need to be having these conversations now. Talk to your local authorities, talk to developers, speak up. Again, this idea of being an ambassador for positive change. I have lots of examples of how these things are working, and I'm about to develop up a presentation about this to share with the developer, and I would actually like to share it with you as well. So I'll create another session all about how we can do that. So a market garden, maybe you can create, it could be a food forest as well, but that's a little bit more long term. But a food forest starts with smaller perennial plants, and you can be harvesting those really quickly while the other things are establishing. So there's different stages of a food forest. But begin it now. Maybe there's bush foods that you can be growing. There's short-term bush foods and there's longer-term ones. Start getting a woodlot happening. But like for a woodlot, you actually need many years until you actually get the harvest. But it's a long-term investment. There's a man here who lives at Crystal Waters who over 20 years ago planted trees, and he said, well, this is my superannuation. And so when he needs some money, he'll carefully, selectively harvest one of those logs, which can then, be sold to someone, which becomes part of their house, or any sort of new structure gets milled up. But if you're in a place where you could grow bamboo, that grows really quickly. And we can use bamboo for all different sorts of, from food to structures, tools, lots of crafts, lots of different things. So that grows quickly. Mushrooms. This is Kat and Dan from Mountaintop Mushrooms, which is just up the road from here. And so they have a little mushroom farm in their shed. So again, you don't need a lot of space, but you can grow high quality food in a small space. So that's, the microgreens, you could do that as well. You could, if you've got some bees, honey, if you've got, have some extra chickens as part of the system. I'm not saying have just chickens, as chickens as part of a system. Let's see if we can create an ecology of farming practices, and maybe that's where those community farms really come into being. You can have this networked system of enterprises that work together. You can become a tea farmer. I'm not talking necessarily about Camellia sinensis, but in my garden here, even just the lemon myrtles, the lemon balm, the lemongrass. Then there's other sorts of bush tucker foods that you can dry and turn into tea. The mulberry leaves, which are coming out my ears, I can dry and make into a tea. So I can become a herb tea farmer. Or you can set up your own food box system, or become a worm farmer, meaning that you're collecting food scraps from elsewhere, and then so you could go into the local town, that maybe it's the cafe or the supermarket, and collect the scraps, process it with your worm farms, and then you've got multiple products from that. You've got the worms, you've got the compost, you've got the liquid fertilizer, and you also have your services to be able to go and show other people how to do that too, which is another thing that you can be doing. So, if you are a permaculture teacher, or if you have some skills, you can go out and start to teach and help other people. Now, maybe you can't do that face-to-face. Perhaps it's virtually doing that. You can get people to take you on a virtual tour by Skype or by Zoom. Or if you keep your social distance, depending where you are, maybe you can do a one-to-one consultancy with people. So go out and help them to get their design their place. So you can coach them, you can teach them, you can consult with them, you can help them to set up maybe a chicken system, a compost system, or a food forest system, or a herb garden, or what is it that people need? Find out what they need locally, and then you can offer that as services. So there is a whole nother set of offerings that you have. And so there's the income generation, but it's also about the giving and sharing and receiving and the everyday acts of kindness. I love this site that's happening now, the Kindness Pandemic. If you check them out, you'll just see so many examples of what people are doing, acts of kindness that people are doing every day to help. So think about what are the ways that every day that you can help. And I guarantee that the more that you feel like, the more that you give, the better it feels. Sometimes it can feel so overwhelming being stuck in this, but when we are able to move past feeling stuck and feeling isolated into thinking about how we can give, how we can contribute, how we can share, how we can get into everyday acts of kindness, it buoys our heart, it brings us alive and connects us in a way that is going to help make a difference, and create mutual aid groups. So this can be through social media, or it can be an email group that you might like to set up. We've set one up here at Crystal Waters with everyone who lives in here is part of an internal email system. And so we have this thing, if people are going up to the shops, they'll say, can I get anything from anyone? We'll check in and say, is there anything anyone needs? Starting to find out if there's anyone that does need help and how we can help. And just it's a simple opening of some kind of platform that works for you, that doesn't mean actually having to be together in a room, that you can help other people. Maybe it's go and get some medicines for one of the older people in your community, or doing the shopping for them because they don't want to go out because they're told that they can't go out. They're over 70, they're in the vulnerable group. So set up these mutual aid groups. And these are, I don't even need to say this really, because they are just happening naturally. This is a phenomenal rise of self-organizing, organic emergence of groups. This is not something being delivered by the government, by organisations, by corporations. This is something that people are doing for people, because people need people. And, reach out. If you need help, reach out to other people, and I guarantee that you will find the help that you need, because everyone is open, so much more open now to this. Now, one of the things that I also wanted to mention too is that there is the possibility of creating or restarting some of the complementary currencies that have been around for quite some time, like the let systems or the time dollars. Maybe now is a time that they can be really useful. I've seen them come and go at different times, and when I find them really useful is when there is a time when there's not much money around, and we're entering into that period. How can we exchange goods and services and get value? If it's not necessarily just volunteering our time, which we can do if we want, but we can also create this community level bartering system. So there's some excellent examples. If you check out Let's, that's a really good one. And so the Let's system too, you don't actually have to have any dollars that you're handing. If we're wanting to have a non-monetary economy in this time, not to hand things, it's all done digitally. And there's other probably even more modern systems that I'm not aware. There's people that I know who are setting up, digital bartering systems that are based on a community economy and ethics too. So if you know about any of those, again, please put them in the links here so we can see where they are, what they are, because this, I think, is going to help us get through while we're going through this bumpy economic time, that we can still be trading our goods and services. It doesn't matter whether you're a hairdresser or an engineer or a builder or a gardener or whatever you might be. There's services and offerings that you have that you can trade, that have a value and that get exchanged in that digital, as a digital currency that's not connected to the monetary system. It works alongside it. You can even do these systems where you have half dollars and half in a complementary currency. The thing about a complementary currency is that it only gets traded locally, so it actually helps to build and strengthen local trading, local economy, and could possibly keep local businesses alive, which is what we want at this time. We don't want all the local businesses to crash because of the economic strain. This can actually help not only you access resources and you deliver services, but also help to keep our community going, our community services. So spend the time. If you find yourself locked away and not able to really do the things you normally do, make it a time when you upskill. What are the things have you always wanted to learn, always wanted to read? Get into growing as much as you can, maybe making some clothes, or making, I don't know, whatever it is that you feel like. It's a time to, like I said right at the start, to pause and to rethink and to think about what are the things that are important to us right now. It's also a really important time to connect with our family and to be teaching these skills, whether it be fermenting or food drying or carpentry, to our children. You know, these are the skills that quite often get forgotten and left behind in our digital age and our busy lives. So let's spend this time now to help to cultivate a love of this and not do it from a thing, because we're poor, because this is something that I know, when I speak to older generations say, well, we don't need to do that anymore because, we were poor then and that's what we did. But let's not do it because we're struggling. Let's do it because it's a really great thing to do. And it's a really important thing to do to build resilient community to go into the future that can withstand future shock of various kinds that we don't even know what's coming around the corner. So if we have these skills, and we have these connective threads, we have a local economy, we have a local food system, then, we're going to be much better situation than we are when we entered into this. And, this is all what permaculture is all about and has always been about. Sometimes it's got misunderstood as being just about gardening, but coming back to what, I said earlier about what Nora was talking about, it's not just that and only that. It is actually way, way more. So the gardening is an entry point into a way of thinking, a way of life, a way of connecting, a way of meeting needs, a way of meeting others' needs, a way of protecting our environment, a way of living a one planet life and a resilient life that helps us to stay safe. So I have this permaculture gardening course. It's an online course that has 9 modules in it, that if you're looking for extra tips, beyond the YouTube, this takes you step by step through creating superb soils, how to set up your garden, what are the sorts of plants to put in, how to set up a food forest, what are the kind of superfoods that you can grow in your own garden, and medicinals, how to set up a medicinal garden, and also some of the things you can grow that you might want to use on your hair and your face. What are the things we can use as a natural conditioner, for example, or natural moisturizer, and how can we make those from the things in our garden? What are all the things we can do to create our own tea garden, and what are the plants we can use for that? And then, what are all the different ways that we can start to cook with all these more unusual foods and different ways of thinking about what's growing in our garden. So that's the 9 modules of the course. And I'll put a link to that available too. So it's called the Incredible Edible Gardening Course, and that's available for you to start anytime, to take as long as you need, and once you've got it forever, so you can keep on coming and accessing that material. Little did I know when I designed that course a couple of years ago that it would be such a useful thing right now. So I hope you have a look at it. If you go into Our Permaculture Life, you'll see a link there that says Permaculture Course, and you can find all the details about it there. You might also be thinking possibly about wanting to become a permaculture teacher, or getting your design certificate now. You have time now, so why not dive in and get your permaculture design certificate, permaculture teacher certificate, so that then you can be rippling out this, and this can become more of your work over the next time. So permacultureeducationinstitute.org is where you'll find all the information about that. Now, I also acknowledge that if you're not living in Australia at this point in time, it's probably much cheaper for you because the Australian dollar is tanking. So, it's a good time to get on board with this. But the other thing I wanted to mention too is that I do have payment plans. So you can either pay it all up front, or you can pay in 3 monthly payments or 6 monthly payments. But if that is also too challenging for you, then do get in touch, because I acknowledge that, there's no rules anymore to what's going on in the world. So let me know if you wanted to maybe make 12 monthly payments or something like that. Let me know and we can talk about it. I also do have scholarships for this course for people in the Global South and for youth. Last year I donated $60,000 worth of this course to people around the world. So if you are in that kind of group, or you have a reason that you think that you may need a scholarship, then let me know. But please also remember that, this is my livelihood too. So don't ask for a scholarship, please, unless you absolutely need to, because otherwise I don't have a living either. And just a reminder too, I've mentioned many times about the YouTube channel. So you'll find lots of information here. So there's the link. So youtube.com and then Maura Gamble, Our Permaculture Life. And this is one of the most popular. So some of the most popular films on there are the No Dig Gardening and a tour around permaculture gardens, but also things like this: how to grow turmeric and how to grow comfrey. And so I talk not only how to grow it, how to harvest it, store it, and use it as well. So you can check that out there. And then the blog, this is what the blog looks like. One of the most recent posts on there is a tour of Charles Dowding's garden that I did. Did a walk around with Charles and Steph, and it was absolutely fantastic, full of so many tips. So you can log on there. So that's ourpermaculturelife.com, and then you'll see like well over 400 posts there of all different sorts of things. And you can just see on the right there, there's my new Resilience Care Pack. So this is the collection of, say, the 10 most useful films that I think might be helpful, and 12 blog posts that I think will be useful for you. So if you click on that, you can access the links to all of that. Over at ourpermaculturelife.com, you'll find, lots of really useful things. And the other thing, as I mentioned right at the start, is that I run something called the Ethos Foundation, which is a registered permaculture charity. And so all the donations that I collect, I just send directly to people. I don't take any charges or any fees. It's only whatever bank transfers there are in the middle that comes out. So we've run free permaculture education programs for women, for teachers, for young people. This is a women's self-help group who we've been supporting to train up their members, and then who then go out into their villages, who then train up more members and just ripple it out. And they recently went around and visited all the different villages and interviewed them about, what are the challenges they're facing, what are the things that they need. And two things resoundingly came through. One was that they need more access to seeds. So we've since connected them up with Seed Savers networks, because most of the seeds they get are from, corporations. They're hybrid seeds that they have to get each year. So they're really wanting seeds, again, that they can save year in, year out, but also getting more perennial plants too. But the other thing that they said that's really struggling is water. So they're still going down to the river for water. They have a big wet season, but then there's a big dry. And so to help keep the water for longer, so they can grow for a longer period of time, so they can have surplus that they can take to the market or share with people to have some extra income. So it's not just about the water, it's about having more access to healthy food for their families. It's also about creating more micro-enterprise possibilities. At the moment, we're running a program to get as many tanks as possible for these women. So we've gathered a few now, and we probably need about 10 more. And when I asked Jane, she's the lady standing next to me in the blue dress there, how much it costs, she was saying to actually buy the tank and get it delivered, installed with all the piping, cost about $500. So if I could raise $10,000 Australian dollars, which is, well, maybe a little bit more now with the dollar change. So I've just had a donation. Someone, thanks Sue so much, donated an entire tank yesterday. So that money's already gone across to Safwell, and she's going to receive her tank within the week. So if you can help, please do that. You might like also to check out the ethosfoundation.org.au website, and there are other programs that I run as well, and you can see them there. So always open for donations, and always so grateful for any support that you can give. And I understand that at this time we're all struggling. We might want to hold on to what we have, but my heart goes out to these women here and to women everywhere, people everywhere, because particularly in places like this, there is no buffer zone. They don't have a savings account, or there's no stores of food stacked somewhere. It is what they have around them is what they have. And so when difficult times come, it's really, really hard. And COVID-19 is about to hit Africa really badly. And I'm thinking that water tanks is also going to be a way that these women can help to keep their families and communities safe by helping to improve the hand washing and the hygiene. So please help if you can. Even if it's $10, $20, $50, that would be absolutely wonderful. And if you can, there's a button in there too to press to say make this a monthly donation, and that would be absolutely wonderful as well. If you can spare a certain amount on a monthly basis, that would be just absolutely awesome. And like I said, it all just goes directly to the women and to the youth program. So thank you for coming along. And next masterclass was one that I said that I was going to run this time, but because of COVID-19, I swapped that around. So the next masterclass is going to be all about permaculture and the SDGs. For some reason, the SDGs bit has fallen off that title, but I'm telling you that's what it is. So it's permaculture and the SDGs, and we're going to be doing that in collaboration with Gaia Education. We recently did some training with that, and I might try and get some of the perma youth to come in because they also did the training with us as well. So that would be really cool. So I will send out the registration form for that soon. I'm about to set up a link on the Permaculture Education Institute org site for all the masterclasses. You can look for back masterclasses and also register for future ones there. So it's not there yet, but it will be very soon. So look out for that. And I will send an email if you've attended this and you'd like to keep on receiving information. I hope you click the button that said stay. Be alerted of all future masterclasses. Oh gosh, sorry about that picture. This is the beautiful Perma Youth Club, and this is the group of local kids who are part of a global permaculture youth movement that is emerging. A lot of young people who have been on the streets marching for change, who really care deeply about the world, have said, they want to do something every day. They want to make a difference in their home lives, in their community lives, and they want to feel connected with other kids around the world all the time. And so we have, every 2 weeks, we have a Zoom meetup, and people are joining from around the world. Absolutely fantastic, from Africa to Europe to India to different parts of Asia, and all around Australia as well. The timing of it, we haven't quite worked to include people from the US, but if you have young people between the ages roughly around 11 to 16, now, I'm saying roughly because, it's flexible. If you've got a young 10-year-old who's super into it and feels like they want to be part of this, then yes, include them. This is the Perma Youth, and I'm hoping that there is one. They just finished doing a song. So they do things like they do camps, they write songs, they write stories, they're teaching each other about permaculture, we're making films together, and they just wrote this song. So I'm going to leave you with the Perma Youth song. This is the first draft. It's still got more to go, but I thought it was so cool. I wanted to share it with you. So thank you so much for joining me. Keep online and keep asking questions and adding things into the chat on the side. I'll be here for another 10 to 15 minutes, and then I will send the replay out to you in the next day or two once I've compiled all the notes, put it together, and then I'll get it out to you. So stay safe, keep well, and I really hope that together we can move through this and build something that. A new vision of how we want to be in this world, and that we don't just race back to how it was before and forget all the things that are important to us, and forget the keeping things local and small is also helping to address climate change and the ecological emergency too. So thank you, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your evening or your day. Thanks for being here. Bye.
We are the Perma Youth, and we save the planet. We are the Perma Youth, and we grow together. We are the Perma Youth, Can't you hear?
Australian soils are dying. Arctic ice caps are melting, water lava lying.
We